What's up,
So
big dog?
I got more work to do.
Big respect. See, I'm tiptoe to
Hey,
say what's
Freddie
up.
T, you think I got him though in the post? What you
Not
think?
at all.
The post? No,
You
maybe a
ain't-
post route.
You haven't had him since he was in the 7th grade.
Hold up, limitless. Take a stomach, got pinning it. I fought the head to witness it. Got my people feeling militant. Way I'm feeling, got me up. On the mission, got me up. Knowing me, I got the key. On this vision, I can trust. Trust, limitless. Take a stomach, got pinning it. I fought the head to witness it. Got my people feeling militant.
Welcome. We have Paolo Banchero. We have my boy Freddie T. I'm your boy RC. Channing did not make it today. But Pivot fans, thank you so much for pivoting with us. I couldn't help but notice, before the show started, you had to spit your gum out.
Yeah.
So somebody had to come give it to you. But you mentioned about what Coach K said, though. You said Coach K said it's good to have strong women around you, starting with, your mother and your grandmother, and also with management. What has that foundation been for you, and how have you learned from the strong women in your life?
Yeah, I would say the foundation really been there since I was born, really. I got two great grandmothers who, took care of me, from the time I was born up till now. Obviously my mom, she has a sister, my auntie, and so they kind of taught me, everything that I really needed to know. They taught me a lot of lessons, both in sports and in life. They expected a lot out of me, but it was unwavering support, throughout the course of my journey. So I think, I felt that growing up always, their support and also their expectations, their critiques, they expected a lot. When I didn't meet those expectations, they let me know.
Yeah.
So it always was like, I wasn't just playing for myself, I was playing for them, trying to, make them happy, make them proud. Going to play for Coach K, seeing, he has a very, strong, support system, with his wife, he has his daughters, and they got his grandkids, and he, always preaches the importance of family and the importance of having strong women as well. And then now me having Nicole as my manager, somebody I look to as like big sister. I never had, someone who just keeps me on point. We all know as men, I feel like, sometimes you get stubborn, you get stuck in your ways a little bit, and I think having that, that female woman perspective, gives you a different outlook, and it really does help you, make good decisions and make the right choices.
Yeah, 100%. We see things a certain way, and there is a foundation that someone like a Nicole, one who's versed in this business, who's educated in this business, but also has an understanding of a different perspective. It allows you to now view things in that way, take that advice, and I think it's always cool to have had a foundation to be able to recognize that before you even get an opportunity to work with her.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective, but most times on the outside looking in, people will see the all-star when they see you. But coming up in a sports family, I want to ask, how did that shape you? Was it pressure, just motivation, or was it just like family vibes?
A little bit of everything. I think, my family, having two athletes as parents, everything was competitive, just naturally, just that was the natural atmosphere was competitive. And so, from the time I started out playing Little League football, basketball, they was always pushing me to be better. I'd have a good game, score a couple touchdowns, and, Pops would be telling me what I could have done better, what play I wasn't, I didn't carry out my fake on this play right here, so they never let me feel like I made it or I was good enough or I had done enough. And so I think for me, it was always motivating. I was always trying to be better. My dad, he was always like, when we go to camps or, I play football, I go to out of state, play football, do camps and stuff. And, I was never the #1 ranked player. So he would always tell me you got to look at these guys that's above you and just slowly check them off the list, every year, every summer, just, look back at those rankings or look back at, whatever that list was and just see who you've passed and see who you still have to pass. And so I think just having that mentality always in the back of my head, there's always somebody I got to chase after. Yeah. That was why going #1 in the draft, was such a huge accomplishment. Because I think that was the first time in my life where I was I did it. I got to the top. I was #1 finally, right? I've been chasing everybody, it seemed like my whole life. So it was, I think, just them creating that type of competitiveness in me.
You mentioned football.
Yeah.
And we were just at the Miami Grand Prix not too long ago. And I know in the inaugural season, you did an interview. A lot of people, that guy mistakenly identified you as Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. Could you imagine yourself being 6'10", playing quarterback. We just saw an article, this kid, 6'10" basketball player, he just went over to play receiver. Could you think you can get it done at the QB position?
Man, it was tough. Like, I remember my freshman year of high school, which was the only year I played football in high school. I was on varsity, and I was like 6'7" at the time. And I felt, and I played football my whole life, and I love football, but I just felt so out of place. Like, that was the first time I think where it kind of felt unnatural.
Yeah.
And the first time in my life where football felt unnatural. And so I think that was when I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna have to just go full-time basketball. But, I think it's good though. Like, if you could see, taller guys starting to play football, like, maybe they can make it work. I think at the quarterback position you could. But I think for me, I was good enough in basketball to where I knew I could stay
good
on that path.
Good enough is an understatement. You can go number one
I knew
overall.
I could stay on that path,
to be where you are now. You talked about chasing. A lot of people don't understand how rich the basketball culture is in Seattle.
Yeah.
Right. We had Jamal Crawford on the show, and he mentioned you when he was here as well. What was it like being able to be in some of those runs and see some of those dudes that were doing it at the highest level to not only kind of inspire you that you can do it, but also show you what you needed to work on to get there?
Yeah, no, I can't say enough about that, honestly. I could sit here and talk to you for 2 hours just about my experience of, talking to those guys as a teenager and how much they helped me. I think, like you said, first part was seeing that it was possible, that it could be done. I think being from Seattle, you top left of the country, you don't get the most attention and whatnot. But I think for me, growing up seeing Jamal, Jason Terry, Isaiah Thomas, Rodney Stuckey, the list goes on and on. Aaron Brooks, I went to his camps growing up, like seeing those guys in the NBA, playing on the biggest stage and knowing where those guys came from, what high schools they went to, what club teams they grew up playing for. I'm playing for the same coaches that coached them. And so I think for me, it just made it seem a lot less, lofty, as a goal. Like I knew I could get there if I'd put in the work, because I'm seeing these guys that, when in the summertime, I see them come back to Seattle and they're just regular dudes. But then you see them, Jamal playing for the Showtime Clippers on TV every night. Like, it just made the goals feel that much more real. And then once I got to like that age of being in high school, when it was time for me to kind of start playing against those guys and matching up, I give a lot of credit to Jamal just for taking me under his wing and like you said, not only just, inviting me to the runs, but like really involving me and really like trying to make me be better and telling me like, what next steps I have to take in my game, to play at that level. And so I think early in those runs, I was like the big man, right? I was just rebounding, doing the dirty work around the rim. Like I'm 15, 16 years old, big kid, right? Playing against, Kyrie, young Zach LaVine, just all these guys. And so I was just doing whatever I could to be on the court, stay on the court. And so I think the next like 2 years after that, I just remember coming back and, Jamal telling me like, nah, you playing point guard today.
Yeah.
Like you bringing the ball up every time. Like I want you to initiate every action in this run today. Like I want you to be the point guard. And me, I'd never really done that. And so it showed me like, nah, okay, this is what you got to do, in the NBA. This is what the star players do, right? That's what he's telling me. Like, the star players that you aspire to be and that you want to be like, this is what they're doing. This is how they're playing. So, you might as well start working on it right now. And I remember one thing he always told me from the time I was 15 was like, it's gonna get here a lot quicker than you think. Like I know it feels like it's forever, till you're there, but I'm telling you, it's gonna happen so fast. You're gonna look up and you're gonna be, in the NBA, and it happened exactly like that. So I give him a lot of credit.
That's why you said pound for pound, Seattle the toughest though.
Yeah, I stand on that for sure. I mean, it's a list. Like I named like 5, 6 names, but I could name there's 20 more that I ain't named.
All right, so if it's Seattle, what's the other regions, cities, states that are up there with Seattle and putting out hoop? Because see, we football guys.
Yeah.
So everything's the South.
Yeah.
Florida, Texas, Louisiana, then you throw California in there because it's big. What are some of those other regions that you think put out players like Seattle?
I mean, you definitely throw California in there. But California's huge, right? Texas has some good players, I think. North Carolina, going to Duke, that they call that the hoop state out there. A lot of rich basketball tradition in North Carolina. But man, I think Seattle, like I said, pound for pound, like we're a smaller state, a smaller, demographic, but if you was to do like by population of hoopers, like we got a lot less people and a lot more hoopers. And so it's just something in the water there, man. Like it's such a rich rich culture. You know, my mom was a high school coach when I was growing up, so you know, all the players that was coming up during that time, I got to see at an early age, you know, when they was in high school and just how they carried themselves, you know, how they moved. And so as a kid, like I was a sponge, you know, I was just sitting there watching, but really I'm just filing it all in my head, you know, taking notes, you know, seeing, you know, how dudes carry themselves, how they warm up, you know, how they play, how they handle certain things. And I was just always mindful and paid a lot of attention to those guys, so. What
were some of the early challenges or adversities that you faced coming up?
I would say it was just really trying to focus on one, or like I never focused on one sport growing up. You know, it wasn't like I knew I wanted to be a athlete, but I didn't know what. Like I didn't really get a clear vision until probably 8th grade freshman year. But like before that, it was like, you know, football, basketball, track, you know, hopefully football or basketball. Like football was the first sport I actually like was dominating at. Like I felt like every time I stepped on the field, I was the best player. Like, you know, and that was all the way up. You know, basketball, it was like that, but it wasn't the same because I played on such a good team, you know, growing up that like I wasn't the star player, right? It was like we all was good, we won all the time, so it wasn't like I was dominating. As where I was in football, I'm the quarterback. I'm touching it every play. I'm running, I'm throwing, you know, I'm dominating the game. I think for me, it was just focusing on, you know, one thing, you know, how can I get better at one sport? And I think it didn't really click for me until, like I said, like 8th grade, freshman year. I think when I got my first offer for basketball, I was in 8th grade, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna spend my summers doing strictly basketball. Because before that, it was, you know, I got a quarterback coach, I'm going to the field, I'm doing stuff, and then I'm going to the gym too. So it was always both. But I think once I got to that point, it was like, all right, I'm a you know, commit all my time and all my energy to hoop.
When did you start being hunted? You know, I went to Marcus Spears, who does NFL Live. His son is a sophomore. He's like top 5 in his class. And so I went to watch their AAU games, and it's obviously all these former players that coach, but it's all these college coaches on the side. But you could see like the way the dudes they were playing tried to attack them.
Yeah.
Right, like I'm gonna go out and get my name off of this kid. When did that start to happen for you, when you were walking in the gym and people understood, okay, that's Paolo. If I go get him, if I outplay him, then that sheds light on me?
I would say that didn't happen until I started getting offers from the Blue Buds and stuff like that. You know, because I kind of hit the scene in a sneaky way almost. You know, like I started playing up. You know, in 8th grade I was playing 16U, and then my freshman year I played 17U. I played with Jaden McDaniels, who's starting for the Wolves right now. That was when I was 15, and it was a 17U team. And I remember my mom, I remember some of my AAU coaches being like unsure if I was gonna be able to like hold my own on that level, because it was EYBL, top like Nike circuit, and I was playing 2 years up. And so like going into that spring, summer, my mom was like, hey, you know, maybe you should play 16U, you know, we don't know, you know, you might be better off playing, you know, 1 year up instead of 2 years up.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, I'm trying to play 2 years up. Like, you know, I want to see what that's about. And so I just remember that being like a thing. And then, you know, my first game, you know, I had a great game. In my first session, I played great. And after that, it was curtains. Like, and I think that was when I realized, like, okay, I'm a lot better than everyone thought. Like,
right.
You know, because I had just finished my freshman year of high school. You know, and that's just local. And I did well, but like I said, it's just local. So once you go on a national stage, it's a little different. But I felt comfortable. I was hooping. Like, I was a big kid, so I felt physically ready.
Yeah.
You know, and I was like, man, this is easier than I thought. Like, it's good competition, but like I can hold my own. I'm good.
Right.
And so I kind of snuck up in that regard, where like I'm playing 2 years up, and everybody's like, who's this kid? But I would say the year after that, my sophomore year, was when I started getting like the Dukes and the, you know, Kentucky's coming in.
Did you play on the same team the next year? Because you didn't have to move up.
I didn't have to move up, yeah.
Right.
So I was now playing 1 year up the next year.
Yeah.
And I started getting, you know, a lot more recognition. I won MVP of the NBA Top 100 camp, which was a huge camp. And so I think after that I started getting hunted. But honestly, man, like I never had nobody like come and like go at me and like because I just never allowed that to get in my head. Like I never allowed myself to be like, oh, I'm top 5 now. I got a Duke offer, like I'm good.
Yeah.
But that was never me. Even though I was a top 3 player, I'm like, shit, I ain't number 1. You know, I'm still hunting. I always had that in the back of my head. If I'm playing a guy who I know is ranked top 30, I already know he's coming. And so I'm not coming in thinking I'm going, like, no, I got to prove to this dude why I'm where I'm at and why he's where he's at. So that's just how I always thought.
I love that.
Yeah, no, I love that mentality too. But I want to take this moment. It's a little pause in the show, right? RC has this thing where he likes to cut the room based on his Super Bowl wins. If we have guests that have Super Bowl wins or what have you, you and we're the only one on this set right now that were drafted in the top 10 of our respective sports.
Wild.
So we get to cut the room like this.
That is a wild
way.
statement.
But he's so good at what he does, so we'll let him stay. Just even with that, just want to kind of get the draft night, right? Ben taking #1 overall. Cooper Flagg, who will be selected #1 overall, another Duke alum. Take us back to your draft night. Yeah. Are there any memories or emotions that you still carry with you to this day?
No, draft night, that was one of the best nights of my life, one of the craziest nights of my life, just emotionally. Because I woke up that day, I would say probably 85, 90% sure I was going to go 2 or 3. So, and I was happy. I was good. I was super excited for it. I was ready to get drafted. And then kind of as that day went on, hour by hour, it kind of got more and more intense where my agent, he coming back to me like, hey, we might have action at #1. And I'm like, for real? And he's like, yeah, man, be ready, stay ready. I don't know, but just be ready. And so kind of as the day went on, I remember just the nerves building up. And then I remember where it was 45 minutes before the draft, they have all the guys come out with their families onto the stage. So they had us in the back of the backstage area, and they had a TV up. It was on NBA Today, but there was no volume on it. They just had subtitles. And I saw I'm sitting there with my parents, and we're just watching the TV. I see my name on the TV, and they're I'm reading the subtitles, and it's I think it was Woj talking, and he's it says Banchero is gaining momentum for #1 pick. And I'm just I tapped my mom and dad. I'm like, yo, that shit might happen. And so we walked onto the stage, and then once we sat down, it was on from that point. My agent, Mike Miller, he's sitting there next to me, and he's stressing. He ain't putting down his phone. He's talking to himself, trying to, get himself locked in. And I'm just sitting there trying to keep calm. And then, by the time it was time to the draft, it was between 3 guys. And then before the commissioner come out, all the cameras started coming to my table. And I was like, damn, it's about to be me. And then my agent slid over the phone and it showed me a text that said, I was gonna go #1. And I damn near lost it. I almost started crying right there. And so just the emotions of being content with going #2 or 3 and being excited about that, to then it kind of being, 360, and now I'm about to go #1, which is a whole different deal just to be the #1 pick. But I'm blessed of how it all worked out, man. It was crazy.
To go, when does it go from that level of excitement to the pressure to have to, or does it ever get to a pressure situation where being #1 overall, now you got to go out there and prove you deserve to be that?
Yeah, no, I think it was pressure because, I didn't visit the Magic during my pre-draft process. I visited the second pick and the third pick, OKC and Houston, but I didn't visit the Magic. So I had never been to Orlando. I didn't step in their building, and they still chose me. And so I was it was some of that pressure of all right, they're choosing me because they really do believe that I can come, change things around and kind of turn this whole thing around, because we didn't meet, they didn't get me in the building. I didn't do a workout or anything, but they just believed in me that much. And so to them, I'm, forever grateful that they, took the chance and picked me because, I think that's, rare for a player not to come in and visit, not to work out and still get picked #1 to that place. So I think I felt that pressure. I think once I realized I was going to Orlando, I was like, you know what, I got to come in and be the guy from day one and just give them my 100%, effort and focus from the start because, they're taking this chance on me, so I got to prove them right.
It's Shaquille O'Neal, Chris Webber, Dwight Howard, and Paolo Banchero.
Yeah.
Those are the 4 first overall picks of the Orlando Magic. Obviously, a trade happened with Chris, but the other 2 took the Orlando Magic to the finals. And in your first year, you become Rookie of the Year, but you get to a Game 7 in the first round. What was that experience like for you, and what did you take from it?
It was eye-opening. You know, I think coming into the league, especially as a young player, you know, you're just trying to get yourself established and get your feet under you. The playoffs is a whole different ball game. Like I've said before, you know, I talked to Anthony Edwards after my rookie season, and we was on the World Cup team together, and he was just telling me, you know, how real the playoffs are and just how different it is from the regular season. And you know, everything he said was right. You know, once I got there in my second year, you feel the difference.
Right.
You know, you feel the difference the way the game's reffed. You know, the referees aren't calling it the same. The intensity from both sides. You know, it's a different intensity on the court. You know, and just the pressure, the momentum, how heavy it is. You feel the difference. And you know, Game 7 specifically was like all of that times 5. You know. And it was just a great experience for me, a great experience for the team to be in those moments and in those environments. And, you know, to be in our first playoff series and to take it to length, you know, all the way 7 games, it showed us a lot about who we were as a team and as a unit, you know. Obviously this year was a little different playing Boston, but, you know, I think both of the experiences have helped us. And, you know, next year I think that's the goal is to, you know, advance past the first round. Now we've been in the first round these 2 years. We felt like what it's like to go to a Game 7, felt like what it's like to lose 4-1.
Yeah.
So like now let's build on both of those experiences and get, you know, make a run next year, you know, get past the first round.
Right after you hit 50 this year, you got hurt.
Yeah.
And it wasn't one of those injuries where you could bounce back really quickly. How much disappointment did you feel in that? Because you were becoming obviously already an all-star, but becoming one of those guys that people expected to show up every night.
Yeah.
And you don't just drop 50.
Yeah.
And sometimes that could be one of those things that you are allowed to continue to ascend, not only you, but your team.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult was that stretch sitting out when you knew that was time you guys could be gaining ground in the East?
Yeah. It was hard. It was hard for everybody. Hard for the team, hard for myself. Because like you said, it was so early. Mm-hmm. You know, dropping 50 Game 4, like, I knew I was gonna come in and have a big year, but like coming in that way and having 50 points, like it kind of was almost for me like, oh, like nah, I'm really like gonna take over this year. Like I'm really on that this year. And so the game I got hurt, I had 31 halfway through the third quarter. And so like I was in such a groove, like mentally and physically. I was physically in shape. Mentally, the game is slow. I'm getting to where I want to go. I'm manipulating, you know, the game and, you know, getting who I want matched up and making the passes at the right time. And it felt like everything was clicking. And then for that injury to happen, it just, you know, put a pause on all that. And so for me personally, it felt like, you know, food was taken off my plate in terms of, like, I come into the year working so hard in the off season, and I just knew I was going to have a huge third year. I had all these goals, you know, that I wanted to hit. And the 50-point game was like a confirmation of like, nah, yeah, the work I did is showing up. And like, it's only Game 4 I'm doing this. Like, it's going to be a long season for everybody else. You know, that's just how I felt. And then so to go down with the injury, it kind of was like just a hit to the stomach where I was like, you know, I've never had to deal with an injury like that, you know, ever in my career outside of a, you know, sprained ankle. You know, I've never had any tears or broken bones, thank God. And so to go down with the oblique, it was just like a reality check almost of like, you know, I'm not Superman.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that can happen to anybody, you know, and so it was a reality check, but I think, you know, I handled it well. You know, I stayed locked in through the time I was hurt. You know, I still traveled with the team and just did my rehab that way and just tried my best to do what I could to stay mentally sharp. And then when I came back, it was a physical, you know, adjustment I had to make, you know, just to getting back used to the physicality and getting back in shape. You know, it took me a while to get my feet under me, but, you know, I was proud how I finished the year and played in the playoffs. You know, I think I played well and was able to bounce back in that regard, but I still wasn't, you know, at all satisfied by how my third year went.
Freddie T, man, I know you've been back in the gym.
Yep.
I think it was old Travis Hunter getting drafted down there that inspired you. You know what I'm saying? My dog played both sides of the football. I mean, just think, man, if he had some of this Kachava, man, shoot, this all-in-one, it's like a nutrition shake, but it's plant protein. Like, this would be something that would have got you right back in the day.
Hey, bro, you're right. I would have definitely loved this back in the day, but even better now, it supports everything I need from my energy, digestions, my muscles, my weight. I've been watching my weight. has 25 grams of plant protein, 85 superfoods. I mean, they should have named it everything because it has everything.
And what's crazy to me though, like you said, the plant protein, I was like, man, I gotta be a vegan to take Kachava? But then I looked at it, bro. Adding plant-based protein to your diet is a great way to get all the nourishment you need, and it's a whole body experience. And what's dope about it, Freddie T, is you can try Kachava now risk-free with their Love It guarantee.
Hey, bro, that's a fact. When I had it, I felt focused, energized, calm, and full for hours. When they say whole body, they wasn't lying.
I mean, absolutely, man. Fuel your game with Kachava. Go to kachava.com and use the code PIVOT for 15% off a subscription for a limited time. That's Kachava, KACHAVA.com. Use code PIVOT for 15% off.
I saw your exit interview. You expressed, wanting to extend and be in Orlando a lot longer. You're a smart kid too, because no state taxes in Florida. That's always a bonus.
Yes, sir.
So,
Bro, it's always so with you and Buddy, dog.
No, I mean, I always tell people, going ninth, I feel like I got the best deal in my draft. Because I was at home in Florida, no state tax. Like, that's a win-win. Great weather, all that stuff. But just going back to the Magic as a whole, like the East is tough. Y'all got some teams, Cleveland, what they've done, Boston, the Knicks, what they've built there. What will it take for you as the leader, as the franchise player of the Magic, and the rest of the guys? What will it take to get you guys past, the first round where you're competitive and, we can see you in the Eastern Conference final?
No, I think it's going to take, one, I think health. I think that's the biggest thing is, obviously, not everyone's going to be healthy all 82 games, but you want your main guys to be healthy, for the playoffs. Right. And so I think this year not having Jalen Suggs, that hurt us a little bit, because he's such a big piece for us. So I think health, but also just, like I said, learning from these last 2 years, right? Like, we've been out in the first round, the first 2 years in the playoffs. Why is that? What do we need to get better at? What do we need to work on? Where are some of our deficiencies? Where are some of our strengths? And how does it all translate into winning in the playoffs? And so I think that's the biggest thing is not only focusing on the regular season success, but like, how can we be successful in the playoffs? I think you see some of these teams, like the Knicks or the Cavaliers, they like the Knicks, they've been in the playoffs the last couple of years, but they winning, go get some guys. And I think their mind is they're trying to win for the playoffs. In Boston, they're trying to win for the playoffs. And I think you can just feel that when you play against some of those teams. And so I think that's our next step is like focusing on, what do we need to do as a team, as an organization to have success and win in the playoffs and make those deep runs.
I want to switch it up a little bit. I read your diaries in the Landscape, and you and your two homeboys was on safari in Disney.
Yeah.
When you get to this point and you are the guy, right? When you grow up in some places like me and Freddie and yourself, sometimes the OGs or the older guys are like, okay, he's gonna make it. We're gonna mentor him, we're gonna take care of him, we're gonna wrap our arms around him. But then when you become a draft pick and you become a star, it's like, who are those people to keep you grounded? Your two homeboys are with you. You even say, man, like they do everything I ask them to do, even though I don't try to take advantage of that. What is it like to have two people, man, that you've known your entire life be in your corner that way at this point in your life?
I think you realize the value of it as you keep going and reaching new heights. Having people with you that's been there since the beginning, it just keeps you grounded and it keeps perspective on like, where you started, how far you've came, and having their perspective always keeps me balanced because they keep it real. They're not yes men. If anything, they're the opposite.
Right.
They see something they don't like, they see something I'm doing that they don't agree with, they're gonna let me know. And they're gonna speak their mind. And when they do, I take that in as, they're speaking from a place of genuine love for me and for our friendship and our relationship. So both of those guys I've known since elementary, middle school days, playing football, playing basketball with them. We all went to high school together. And so we've seen each other through it all. I feel like we've just grown, like stuff we've had to deal with. I think we was in high school during COVID, right? So like that was like, especially in Washington, like everything was shut down for 2 years. And so we didn't have nothing to do but to just link up and talk about what we was gonna do once all this shit got over. And so I think going through that and then just me going off to college and them staying home back in Seattle, And then me, you know, making it to the NBA, you know, I told them, you know, I want y'all to come with me, you know, because my family, right, my mom and dad, they got my brother and sister, you know, so they're not gonna, you know, they wasn't gonna get up and move from Seattle all the way to Florida. You know, that's just not who my parents are. My parents is both born and raised in Seattle. They don't really want to leave. So, you know, I told them like, hey, I need somebody out here with me. You know, I can't be here by myself. Just as a 19-year-old, like that was gonna be tough. So, you know, they was, you know, graceful enough to like come out there and get up and come, you know, be with me and be by my side and help me out with whatever it is I need. And, you know, we still best friends. You know, we still kick it. We still crack jokes. Like we do all the stuff friends do. But we also understand that we're all working towards something and we understand what the goal is. And, you know, no one understands that more than them. They don't let me get distracted. They make sure I'm working out all my stuff throughout the summers. You know, we ain't just chilling, BSing. You know, we locked in, back home, getting up at the same time every day, going to get our work done, and then, you know, chilling after that. It's never chill before you work. You know, it's always work before you chill. So.
Tell me what happened that started the 5 a.m. wake-ups. And they said you did something that made you have to get up at 5 a.m. I just wanted to know what it was.
Oh, man. It wasn't even nothing crazy. Like, it was something, I think it was something petty where, like, my mom was like, you know what? Your ass is getting up at 5 a.m. and working out. I ain't gonna lie, high school, I ain't really like lifting weights like that. I was a big kid. Like, I was growing, too. So, like, my body, I was like, I don't really want to lift. I'm growing. I'm a hooper. Like, lifting ain't really what I'm trying. I'm just trying to get better, work on my game. And so, like, I think they were doing some lifting program at my high school, and like I was skipping it. I wasn't doing it, right? It was supposed to be after school.
Yeah.
But I was going to just hoop.
Right.
Really, I'm supposed to be lifting. And so my mom, she ended up finding out, or they said I wasn't going to the lifting program after school. And so like, we got into it about that. I'm telling her I don't want to lift. I'm trying to just focus on this. And she like, no, you need to lift. You need to be doing this. And then it kind of got to that point where she was like, you know what? Since you don't want to listen, your ass is going to get up at 5. Since you want to go hoop,
right,
you're going to get up at 5 and go hoop before school. Because I was doing it after.
Right.
So she was like, no, you're going to get up at 5 and go before school and do all the hoop and go hoop all you want at 5 a.m.
Right.
And so it was like that. And then I ended up doing it. I was like, shit, I can do this, you know?
Yeah.
But then what it was, my basketball coach, he started catching me sleep in class. So then he had to go back to my mom, like, you got to cut the 5 a.m. workouts. Because I was catching up on sleep in the classroom. But yeah, that was my mom, man. She was hard. She was tough.
Right.
Yeah, she was tough. But all that stuff, I think, just molded me into who I am. Like, it just helped me, you know, realize, like, the work ethic, you know, you can't teach work ethic. You know, it got to be in you, you know. So I think my mom, having her, you know, always on my ass, it just drilled that into my head. Like, you don't want to work, if you don't want to work during this time, you're going to work during this time. And there's non-negotiable, so.
You mentioned going off to Duke, you know, your homeboy staying at home. What is, like, Coach K is one of those, like, mythical head coaches, right? That everybody from the outside, you see him and you want, like, a piece of knowledge, a piece of wisdom, but he's also sort of quiet away from the court. What is something that in your short time there you were able to take away from Duke?
He taught me more in those 9-10 months than any coach has taught me in my life. You know, just basketball, off the court, on the court. One thing he always stressed, especially to me, was having a strong presence and a strong face, as he would say, but really a strong presence where, you know, any room you walk into, you know, whether it's a basketball gym, a meeting room, you know, an interview, you know, having a strong presence about you, having a strong, you know, strong appearance, strong look. You know, you don't want to show any forms of weakness. You don't want to show fatigue. You don't want to show frustration, sadness. Like, you want to look strong in everything you do. I think that was something that, as an 18-year-old going into college, I didn't really understand at the time, or like didn't have a full grasp of like what he meant when he would say that. And I think, you know, ever since kind of I've left, it's like I've seen exactly what he means and exactly what he was talking about, where, like, you know, these rooms you're walking into as a professional athlete, you know, you don't want to show weakness. You don't want to show any of that because, you know, you're being looked at as, to the team, as an investment, right? They're going to pay you millions of dollars to represent their franchise. Like, you can't show, you know, you don't want to be a head case, you know, showing all this emotion and being frustrated and pissed off. obviously there's points where that does happen, but just in general, as a leader of men, as a leader of a team, you can't do that. And so I think him understanding where I was headed and what my goals were, he knew I wanted to be #1 pick. He knew I wanted to, be a star in the NBA. And so I think he was preparing me for what comes with that and how I would have to handle myself. And I think, he just helped me tremendously in that aspect, because without him, I don't know if I would have, understood that. I don't know if I would have, had the maturity that I do now in terms of how I carry myself and how I just go about my business.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the dynamics of going into an NBA locker room at 19, right? How were you welcomed, to the Orlando Magic organization? Were there any veterans that kind of pulled you to the side and sort of chopped it up with you and gave you advice?
No, I was welcomed with open arms. They welcomed me open arms from the second I got there. The team was great. Like, I remember first meeting the team at Summer League that year and us doing like a dinner and them being like the coolest group of dudes I really ever been around. And, a couple guys who were there my rookie year that really helped me. One was Markelle Fultz, who was a former #1 pick. So he understood the shoes I was in. And so he was with me my first 2 years there. He helped me a ton, man. Like, UW guy. I knew that. I looked up to Markelle, like watching him. I was in like 8th grade when he was at the Dub. And so I was like at that stage where I was like realizing my NBA dreams. And to see a dude come to UW and go #1 was like amazing to me. Just to see that up close. I went to, his games. And so to see it was crazy. And then when I got to know him and actually be around him, like, he helped me a lot, because I think my rookie year, I just wanted to be so good. I wanted to do so good that, when I didn't play well or I had a rough night, whatever, like I would take it super hard. I would put so much, unnecessary, burden and pressure on myself. And he would see that. And, he was always the guy to pull me to the side and just be like, relax, bro. Like, it's 82 games, bro. Like, you ain't about to play. You ain't about to have a great game every night. It's just not going to happen like that. And so he always just kept that perspective where, like, you pressing so hard to be great and to do shit the right way. And he was just that calming presence. And he was like that, not just for me, for the whole team, honestly. But I think for me, being a #1 pick and him being in those same shoes and him dealing with the stuff he had to deal with in terms of the struggles and, how people wrote him off and all that, like, he understood more than anybody, just how all this can affect you. And so he was a huge help for me my first 2 years, a huge help. Another guy was Terrence Ross, another UW guy actually, who I watched growing up a lot. He helped me a lot too, because he had been there for I think 8 years in Orlando. I looked up to him too. I would go to him, ask him, what he thought about how I was playing, what I could do better. And he was just always a really, really down to earth dude, and he would just keep it straightforward. I think you could do this more, but at the same time, you are doing this, but I would like to see you do more of this for the team or for yourself. And so I think just having him to go to and be like, what you think about how I'm playing or what you think about this, and him just giving me that honest feedback, helped me. Because I knew it was coming from a good place. Like, T. Ross, one of the chillest dudes ever. And so I knew it was coming from the right place. He wasn't trying to, lead me in any one direction.
Yeah, speaking of UW, your mom left as the all-time leading scorer when she was there. You guys used to play many one-on-ones coming up?
More my younger days, but we played some one-on-one games.
When did you start winning them?
I would say I started winning probably around 12, 13 years old. I got a little more skill, could go past her. I could go past her. But before that, it was just straight. Like, I couldn't even, she would turn her back on me. I couldn't even get around to strip the ball. It was just walk me down to the front of the rim. But she stopped playing me though. Like, after once I think I beat her the first one or two times, she just stopped playing me.
As a parent, once you lose, it's a wrap.
Once you lose,
it's no longer fun to play. After that, like, that's a wrap. Nicole went to North Carolina, right?
She did, sadly, yeah.
Yeah, she went to North Carolina. So you're not like, oh, Duke Blue Devil, but also Jamal gives you a call that Michael Jordan wants to talk to you. How were you able to put your Duke ties aside?
Oh, that was easy when it was MJ. When it was MJ, it was easy, man. That was easy. But yeah, that was wild. I think because during that time I was, figuring out, where I was going to sign, shoe deal, and all that endorsement. It was between Adidas and Jordan. I just got a call from Jamal. I was in the airport actually. I remember, and I hadn't talked to him in a minute, and he just called me. He was like, "Yo, how you doing? What's up?" He was like, "Man, you won't guess who I just got off the phone with." And I was like, who? He was like, the black cat. And I was like, who's the black cat? He was like, Michael Jordan, bro. And I was like, Michael Jordan? I was like, about what? He's like, about you, dog. He's like, he called me about you.
Right.
And he was like, Michael Jordan don't ever call me. And he was like, so the fact that he called me, to talk about you, like, man, he really wants you to be a part of Jordan. And I was like, damn, for real? And he was like, yeah, man, like, called me, said he loves your game, loves you about the right stuff. Like, he said, like, we got to get you to the brand. I was like, shit, that's all you had to say. And I think I signed with Jordan, I don't know. I think I signed right after Summer League.
Yeah.
And so just hearing that, and knowing Jamal, like, he ain't just going to say that, he really got that call. And I ended up getting to meet Michael Jordan last year. In COVID, I had just watched The Last Dance too, right? Like, that came out, I watched that about 2-3 times. And so just to be able to sign with Jordan and be a part of that brand and just the greatness that is associated with that brand, and me trying to, build my own, greatness, it's no better place to be for me. So really excited about that.
So you got North Carolina all over, man.
Yeah, you know what? I ain't gonna lie. Growing up, I actually liked the Tar Heels a little bit.
Right.
I can't lie, because my Rotary team, my high school AAU team, or elementary through high school AAU team, is Carolina blue colors.
Gotcha.
So like that was my colors I wore playing. So we always liked Carolina. And my mom, she also had a player that she coached in high school go on to play at North Carolina. And so there was some ties there to North Carolina, but I ended up being a Blue Devil. I'm proud to be a Blue Devil.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
I couldn't shoot a basketball good enough to be either. Michael Jordan brings me to like the clutch gene.
Yeah.
It shows up in the playoffs. And you think about these playoffs, you had Donovan Mitchell scores 48, I think, points. Halliburton doesn't have a great day. He hits the clutch shot. You had the Clippers where James Harden doesn't play well in a Game 7. The Denver Nuggets find a way to win. What is it about those pressure moments, Paolo, that allows some people to step up and shine and then others to fall short of what they need to accomplish?
I think really what I've learned in my life or my short career so far is that, you got to have like the shortest memory ever, like a short-term memory, whether it's you're having a great game or a bad game, because especially in the playoffs, if the game's tied with 2 minutes to go, then nothing else that just happened in the 46 minutes before that matters, because the game's tied up 2 minutes to go, 0-0. And so just having that, that short-term memory of like, whether I'm 0 for 10 or 10 for 10, I got to show up in these last 2 minutes. I got to show up in the fourth quarter, because this is a money time. This is when the game is won or lost in this time right here. And so I think having that perspective of, whether it's something, if it's breathing or breath work, or if it's like meditation you do in the huddle, like something that grounds you and settles you down for, this fourth quarter or this last 5 minutes. I think for me, that's just where I try to find myself going to, is like when you get in those clutch situations or those big games, whether it's on the road, whatever, crowd's loud, like, how can I ground myself, bring myself back home and get ready to go win this game? And so I think, like you said, Halliburton, Donovan Mitchell got 48, but, Halliburton made enough plays to win that game at the end. And so, they ain't gonna remember that 48 as much as they're gonna remember that last shot. And so I think just, doing whatever it takes to win the game, I think is the biggest thing.
What stands out the most so far in these playoffs?
I ain't gonna lie, this has been great playoffs so far. I mean, it's still early, but I think these playoffs have been great. I think what stood out for me is, a lot of these teams, especially the road teams, they're coming in, I think, playing with a sense of freedom. I think when you play on the road in the playoffs, if you're able to win one of those first 2 games, it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the series. I think the series doesn't start until a road team wins.
Yeah.
So I think this first games of the second round, New York won, Indiana won, Golden State, I think every road team won. And so I think you're really gonna see what these top seed teams are made of. And so I think some of these teams that you see get, the 60+ win seasons, it's like, those are great seasons, but then it's like, you gotta reciprocate, you gotta perform that same way in the playoffs. And so I think for me, it's just interesting to see, because I'm trying to get to the second round, I'm trying to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So just kind of sitting back, watching, learning, like, all right, well, these guys were dominating during this time, but, hey, the Indianas of the world. Like Indiana, you know, if they handle business, this is going to be their second straight year being in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they haven't been a top 3 seed. And so it's like you're seeing like, okay, this is how they're playing, you know, in these moments right here. Like they're moving the ball, everyone's sharing, everyone's guarding. Like playoffs is a different game. You know, you can't look at the regular season and really compare it to the playoffs. You know, you see teams play differently, you see players play differently, good and bad. You see some guys that are killing in the regular season, you know, their stats drop in the playoffs because it ain't as free flowing, it's not as open, you know, the court isn't as open in space in the playoffs. It's slow, it's condensed. And then you see some players who, you know, maybe in the regular season they're here and then all of a sudden they rise up to the occasion and take their game to another level. So for me, I'm just sitting back watching it all, just taking notes.
You've been highly successful early on in your career. If there was one thing or some things that right now in this off season you're focusing on, what are those things you want to go back into camp with this year in ways you've elevated yourself as a leader and as a player?
Yeah, I think going into next year, definitely taking the next step as a leader, you know, vocally, you know, and just through my actions and what I do on the court. You know, I think I've done a good job of it, but I think I can still take another step in terms of just trying to elevate those around me, teammates, coaches, everyone, just elevating the whole, you know, environment, you know, because I think in order to be winning in the biggest stage and in the playoffs, you have to create that environment. You have to create that culture, you know, in October and September during training camp. And it has to last you the whole year. You have to, you know, hold that standard at a certain level throughout the whole season. So I think just me working on that for myself and coming in with that mentality. And then, you know, with my game, just better in every part of my game. But I think specifically, you know, becoming a better shooter, becoming a better decision maker, you know, watching more film, seeing how teams guard me, what I've been dealing with my first 3 years, what I do well against, what I don't do well against, you know, seeing where some teams have tried to, you know, attack my weaknesses, whether it's, you know, on offense or defense, you know, just getting better, you know, trying to find every weakness that they can go at and trying to better it. So that's been the focus.
29, 8, and 4 in 5 playoff games this season ain't bad at all.
You know.
Some stuff to build on, but that's amazing. We always ask our guests what's their biggest pivot in life. That's that one moment you can look back on and say, without this happening to me or for me, I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today.
Without this happening, man, I would say maybe COVID happening, man. Because I just think it happened in such a pivotal time for me. We had just lost the state championship my junior season. We lost in the state championship on Saturday night, and then everything got shut down on a Tuesday, the next Tuesday.
Dang.
So it was like my season had just got over, and then like school was out, everything was shut down, and so it was like, okay, when's this gonna be over?
Right.
And then it just never got over, and so I think a lot of people just kind of went with it and, you know, stayed cooped up in the house and just did nothing. And I think for me, it was the opposite. Like, luckily I had, you know, a trainer in Seattle who had gym access, which was amazing because when I look back, like, there was no park you could go to, no gym you could go to. Like, every possible basketball court was literally shut down. Like, they had chains on nets, like you couldn't even shoot outside if you wanted to.
Wow.
He had a gym, small little gym in downtown, like with a little coded door, somewhere like this. Like, you wouldn't even expect it to be a gym. You just walk in there and it's a gym. He had that open, and I was in there 7 days a week for a year straight.
Wow.
And I just got myself in ridiculous shape going into college. Like, once that junior season was over and everything got shut down, like, my mind immediately went to, all right, I got to be ready to go to Duke, because I know when I go to Duke, the next step is the league. And so I think it just shifted my mind of, like, instead of focusing on like senior prom and just my senior year of high school, it was like, no, that's over with. COVID kills all that. It ain't no senior year. Like, you're doing school online.
Right.
So there's nothing to look forward to in high school anymore. Like, everything I'm looking forward to is college and beyond. And then coming in during that time, Coach K let me know that it was gonna be his last year. So now I really know, you know, all right, like, this is my 1 year, this is his last year, it's gonna be a big thing. I gotta be ready for it. And then if I do what I'm supposed to do, then I should be able to go to the NBA. And so I think that was the biggest pivot, was all that stuff happening during that critical point in my life, and me just kind of, shifting my mindset almost to focus on, my future and doing whatever I had to do to prepare myself for the future.
Nah, that's amazing, man. The career and the trajectory seems like the sky's the limit, and also that sort of mindset, the way that you approach it, I think a lot of young athletes can learn from that. That, when you said earlier, I know if I'm top 3, that if you top 30, you're coming for me. I don't think people understand that as much as they need to sometimes, man. But best of luck. Thank you for adjusting your schedule. Thanks to your team as well for continuing to work with us, man. This was amazing. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, the other light skin, he got sick or something. All this traveling. But he don't take no baths, though.
Hold up, limitless. Niggas to me, got pinning it. I fought the head to witness it. Got my people feeling militant. Way I'm finna get me up. On the mission, get me up. Knowing me, I got the key. On the vision, I can trust. Limitless. Niggas to me, got pinning it. I fought the head to witness it. Got my people feeling militant. Way I'm finna get me up.